The boxes were already at the gate. Someone had stacked them in the rain like they were waiting for a garbage truck, a whole life folded into damp cardboard and left out in the cold to soften and rot. A child's first ultrasound photo curled against the wet inside one of them, the ink already bleeding. Up the marble stairs, behind glass and gold light, the house that had eaten 3 years of her was warm. Out here it was 39 degrees and falling, and the woman at the gate had nowhere left to fall. She had not screamed. That was the part she would remember later, that her body had gone so quiet it forgot how to make sound. Her fingers found the iron and held on while the rain turned her dress to a second skin, and the only warmth left in the whole world was the small frantic kicking under her ribs, her son telling her he was still here even if no one else wanted them. The voice came down the staircase like something poured from a height, slow and clean and without a single crack in it. The Choi family does not put its name on a woman like you, and it certainly does not put its name on whatever you are carrying. Madam Choi did not raise her tone. Cruelty that sure of itself never needs to. Behind his mother stood the man who had once traced the shape of that belly with his hand and called it a miracle. Now Sung-ho studied the floor as though the pattern in the marble had become the most important thing he had ever seen. He did not come down. He did not speak her name. His silence was the loudest thing on that whole rain-drowned street, and it answered every question she had been too afraid to ask for months. Across the street, where the streetlight gave up and the dark took over, a long black car sat with its engine breathing and its lights off. It had not just arrived, it had been there for hours, the way a thing waits when it already knows what is going to happen and has simply come to watch the ending it predicted. The man in the back seat watched her hold the gate and did not look away. He knew her name. He knew the name of the child she carried and the name her mother had buried in the ground 28 years ago to keep her alive. He knew exactly whose blood was kneeling in the rain in front of the Choi house, and he knew that the people who threw her out tonight had just made the single worst mistake of their lives. He simply could not believe they had handed her to him this easily. 3 weeks before the rain, Amara Sefu still believed she was loved. She moved through the small apartment Seung-ho kept her in like a woman folding laundry around a secret, humming to the baby, setting 2 teacups out from habit even on the nights he never came. She told herself the distance in him was work. She told herself the late calls were nothing. A woman 7 months along learns to lie gently to herself, because the truth, if it came all at once, might shake something loose. His phone had grown a password the month she got pregnant. It sat face down now, the way it always sat, and when it lit in secret. She had never once picked it up. Tonight she looked at it the way you look at a closed door behind which someone is breathing. She did not pick it up. She would hate herself for that later, for the small, obedient woman who chose peace over proof. Instead, she pressed her palm flat to her belly and made a promise she could not keep, that whatever was wrong, she would fix it by loving harder. When he came home that night, he smelled of a perfume that was not hers, something expensive and floral and brand new, and when she rose to greet him, he stepped back from her belly like it might stain him. He stayed 11 minutes. She counted. He left saying he had a meeting, and the door closed with the soft final click of a man who has already gone somewhere else in his heart. The perfume stayed in the room after he was gone. She sat in it for an hour, breathing another woman's signature into her lungs, and she did not yet know that she already knew that scent. She had smelled it 100 times, on someone she trusted with her whole life. On the collar of the jacket he forgot was a print of plum lipstick, and snagged on the shoulder seam, one long braided strand of hair. She lifted it to the light and felt nothing, because her mind refused the math. Box braids, plum, a laugh she could almost hear. She set it down and called it a coincidence, the last lie she would ever tell herself for free. So she did what she always did when the floor tilted. She reached for her best friend. Naya Bello came within the hour, the way she always came, with a paper bag of the ginger sweets Amara craved and a face arranged into perfect sorrow. She crossed the room and folded Amara into her arms, and over Amara's shoulder, where no one could see it, her expression did something that had no name in any language built for friends. "Tell me everything," Naya whispered, stroking her back, and Amara told her everything. The perfume, the 11 minutes, the phone that locked her out of her own life. Naya made the right sounds at the right moments and squeezed her hand, and called Seung-ho a coward and a fool, and said the words every betrayed woman aches to hear. "You deserve so much better than him." She meant it. She simply meant it for herself. In her lap, her phone lit with a message, and the corner of her mouth lifted before she could stop it. She thumbed the screen dark against her thigh. The name on it was the same name Amara had just spent an hour crying over. The plan, the two of them had decided, was almost ready. While Amara wept into a teacup, a hotel suite across the city waited with the lamps already low. This was the part Amara would not learn for weeks, the part that would turn her grief into something colder and far more useful. Seung-ho poured the champagne. Naya laughed the laugh she never used in Amara's apartment, loose and bright and free of any weight. They had been doing this for almost a year, building their happiness directly on top of Amara's, like a house raised on someone else's grave. They toasted too soon. Soon meant the night the Choi family would finally throw the inconvenient woman out for good. Glass kissed glass. Somewhere across the city, a pregnant woman fell asleep clutching a phone that never rang, comforted by the certainty that at least she still had one person in the world who would never, ever lie to her face. She slept like the trusting sleep, deep and undefended. She had no idea she was already a marked woman, that the people closest to her had set a date, or that far above all of them, another player had been quietly assembling the truth for months and was only waiting for the right night to move. Down on the street, in a car that had no reason to be there, a man watched her window go dark. He had been watching for a long time. He was not the danger. He was the only one who saw the danger coming. Every afternoon she walked the long way home to feed the bakery cats. It was the one selfish thing she did, the one corner of her life that belonged only to her. She did not know that her small daily kindness had become the most closely studied event in one dangerous man's week. She crouched the careful way pregnant women crouch and clicked her tongue, and 3 scarred alley cats came to her like she was the only safe thing in the city. She laughed at them. It was the last easy laugh she would have for a long time. Then the back of her neck prickled. That animal certainty that someone is looking. She straightened and turned, scanning the alley mouth, and for half a second she caught it. A long black car idling at the far end where no car like that had any business being. It did not move. It did not need to. By the time she blinked, it had pulled smoothly away, and she told herself she had imagined it, the way she was teaching herself to imagine away everything that frightened her. If your chest is tight right now, if you already need to know who was in that car, then you understand exactly why this channel exists. Afro Korean Story Universe lives for nights like this one. Tap subscribe so we know these stories are reaching the people who feel them, because that single tap is the only thing that tells us to keep building worlds this dark and this beautiful for you. Now stay close, because she has no idea who just watched her fall. Ryu Tae-min closed the folder on his knee. Inside it were photographs of her going back further than she would ever guess, and beneath those, a single old document with her father's true name on it, and the seal of a society that had spent 28 years looking for the daughter it lost in a war. He had found her months ago. He had simply been waiting for the choice to do what cruel families always do, because a woman rescued from comfort owes you nothing, but a woman pulled out of the rain remembers your face for the rest of her life. He was patient. The rain was coming, and then it came. The night the rest of the story had already shown you, except now you knew what it cost. Now you knew about the perfume and the braided strand and the toast to soon. Now you knew that the woman climbing these stairs in the rain was walking straight into a trap that 2 people who claimed to love her had built with their own hands. She had come to ask him to choose her, that was all. She had rehearsed it on the bus, a small brave speech about the baby and second chances, and she climbed the slick marble holding her belly and her courage in the same 2 hands. The doors opened before she reached them, but it was not Seung-ho who came out. Madame Choi filled the doorway like a verdict. She looked Amara over once, the wet dress, the swollen belly, the hope still stupidly alive in her eyes, and she let the silence do its work before she spoke. "You were a convenience," she said. "Conveniences are returned when they are no longer convenient. The Choi family does not breed with women like you." Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water, and somewhere behind that, the small, frantic kicking under her ribs stopped, as if even her son had gone quiet to listen. And there he was, just behind his mother, the father of her child, studying the floor. She called his name once. He flinched and did not lift his head. That flinch told her everything she had refused to know. He had agreed to this. He had let it be planned over champagne. The doors closed. The warm gold light shrank to a line and then to nothing. She backed down the stairs she had climbed with such hope, and the rain swallowed the sound she finally made. She went down by the boxes that held her whole life, and she stayed there, on her knees in front of the gate, holding her son and the wreckage of everything at once. Her pulse beat in her throat at 140, and the cold crept into her bones, and she thought, with a terrible flat calm, that maybe she would simply stay here until there was nothing left to feel. The little knitted hat she had made was already soaked through. She would remember that detail for the rest of her life, the small, wet wool of a future that the people on the other side of that gate had thrown into the cold. And she would remember, too, the sound of a car door opening behind her. She heard it before she saw it, the soft, expensive sound of a heavy door swinging open, and then footsteps that did not hurry. People hurried around, pregnant women crying in the rain. This man walked toward her like the rain had been told to wait. The rain stopped hitting her. She looked up through her wet lashes and found a tall man in black holding an umbrella over her and not himself, so that the water ran off the edge and soaked his own shoulders. He did not smile. He did not offer pity. He simply looked at her like she was something valuable that had been left out in the weather by fools. "Can you stand?" he asked, and his voice was low and even, the voice of a man who had never once raised it because he had never once needed to. She did not know him. Every instinct she owned told her not to trust a beautiful stranger in a $1,000 suit, but she was on her knees in the rain with nowhere on earth to go, and his hand was already out. She looked at the hand for a long time. Then she took it. She would spend weeks telling herself it was only because of the cold. It was not only because of the cold. He helped her into the back of the car, as though she were made of glass and gold, settled a heavy dry coat over her shoulders, and shut the door against the storm. The rain became a distant drumming. For the first time in hours, she was warm, and that small mercy undid her more completely than any cruelty had. "Who are you?" she asked, when she could speak again. He watched the city smear past the glass before he answered. "Someone who has been waiting a long time for tonight," he said. It was not the answer she wanted. It was, she would realize much later, the only honest thing anyone had said to her in a year. The car slid into the city, and the mansion fell away behind them for good. She did not know where she was being taken. She only knew it was away, and that for tonight, away was enough. He took her to the top of the city, to rooms made of glass and shadow where the whole of Seoul lay glittering at her feet like something owned. There were clothes already her size in a closet, food already stocked for someone 7 months along. She stood in the middle of it, dripping onto a floor that cost more than her life, and understood that none of this was an accident. She bathed because her body was shaking, and dressed in soft gray things that fit too well, and came back out to find him by the window with 2 cups of ginger tea, the exact thing she craved, the thing only one other person in her life had known to bring her. The coincidence sat in her stomach like a stone. "How do you know what I drink?" she asked. He did not lie, and he did not fully answer. "I know a great many things about you," he said, "that you do not yet know about yourself." And then, quieter, the line that would keep her awake. "Your father, for instance." She had no father. She had a grave she had never visited, and a mother who had died 3 years ago with her lips sealed around a secret. "Do not speak about my father," she said, and her voice cracked down the middle, because the truth was she knew nothing about him at all, and this stranger seemed to know everything. One quick whisper before this turns, because what comes next changes everything. If you are still here, still holding your breath with her, drop the emoji that matches your mood right now in the comments so I know you are in this with me. Tell me where in the world you are watching from, and the time on your clock as you read this. And if you are watching on your TV, reach over and hit that like button so we know you are in the room. Then come straight back, because Taemin is about to do the one thing no one saw coming. He slid a folder across the table instead of arguing. Inside was a photograph of a man she had never seen, whose eyes were unmistakably her own, and a name and a seal, and the beginning of a truth so large it would not fit inside the small life she had been living. "Your mother hid you well," he said, "but the people who have been looking for you found you tonight, the same as I did." She walked out onto the terrace because the rooms had become too small for what he was telling her. The city burned gold below her, and she stood at the railing with one hand on her belly and the folder in the other, and felt the ground of her entire identity tilt beneath her bare feet. 12 hours ago she had been a discarded mistress kneeling in the rain. Now a dangerous stranger was telling her she was the lost heir to a power that had shaped this city from the shadows. She did not believe him. She told herself she did not believe him. And then someone began pounding on the penthouse door. They did not knock like guests. They knocked like men who had spent 28 years earning the right. When Taemin opened the doors, 3 figures in long dark coats stood waiting, and at their center an old man with iron in his spine and grief worn smooth by decades. The old man stepped inside and looked at Amara, and his composure cracked for the first time in years. "You have his eyes," he said, and his voice shook. "We have searched for you since the night your father fell. Forgive us that it took so long." He lowered himself, slowly, painfully, onto one knee on the polished stone, and the 2 men behind him followed. 3 grown men knelt to a barefoot pregnant woman in a borrowed sweater. She backed into the cold glass, shaking her head, telling them they had the wrong person, that her father was nobody, that her mother had been a seamstress who died poor. The old man lifted his eyes. "Your mother," he said gently, "was the widow of the most powerful man this city never dared to name." And then he told her about the night she was born. The night she was born, the city tore itself apart. A war between societies that had simmered for years boiled over in a single night of fire and rain, and when it ended, her father lay dead in the street, and his enemies were already hunting for the newborn who carried his blood and his claim. Her mother ran with her into the rain that night and never stopped running. She buried the name, buried the blood, buried the truth so deep that her own daughter grew up believing softness was all she came from. She kept Amara alive by keeping her small, and it had worked for 28 years, right up until the Choi family threw the secret out into the open along with her boxes. Every poverty, every silence, every time her mother flinched at a knock on the door, it all rearranged itself in an instant into a single, devastating shape. Her mother had not been weak. Her mother had been a soldier, hiding a princess in plain sight. And the grief of finally understanding her, 3 years too late, brought Amara to her knees a second time that night. Taemin did not move to comfort her. He stood back in the shadow and watched her break, and something almost like restraint tightened his jaw, the look of a man holding himself back from a thing he wants very much. He had not lied to her once tonight. He had simply not yet told her the one truth that would change how she saw him forever. The old man held out a carved seal in an open box, the seal of her father's chair, empty for 28 years. "The society will not survive another year leaderless," he said. "We do not ask you to want this. We ask you to take what is yours, before your father's enemies take it instead. Decide by dawn." They left the seal on the table and went, and Amara sat alone with the weight of a throne in a wooden box. She watched the sun come up over a city that had broken her twice in 12 hours. She thought about the gate, and the flinch, and the perfume, and the little wet wool hat. She thought about her son, and the world he would be born into as the child of a woman with nothing, or the child of a woman with everything. By the time the light turned gold, the soft woman who fed alley cats had made a decision that would end several lives. She picked up the seal. Her hand did not shake this time. The woman who set it down again was not the woman who had been thrown into the rain, and everyone who had ever underestimated her was about to learn the difference. They brought her to the hall her father had ruled, a cathedral of shadow and gold with a single empty chair at its head, and as she walked its length, every man in that room rose and bowed to the pregnant woman in black, and the empty chair stopped being empty. She sat where her father had sat. The soft mustard sweater and the alley cats felt like another woman's memory. In their place was a queen of shadows with a city in her fist and a child beneath her heart, and the first thing she did with all that new and terrible power was ask one quiet question. "Bring me everything," she said, "on the Choi family, and everything Naya Bello has ever touched." Taemin stood at her right hand where he had always intended to stand, and for the first time something close to a smile touched his cold mouth. He had been right about her. The men moved to obey. Within hours, the truth she had refused to see in her own apartment would be laid out in front of her in pieces, and there would be no looking away from it now. She waited for the file the way a storm waits behind a still sky. She already suspected what it would show her. Some part of her had known since the plum lipstick and the long braided strand, but knowing a thing and seeing it are two different cruelties, and she was about to suffer the second one. They brought it to her that evening, spread across the same black table where the first folder had changed her life. Photographs, dates, a year of them. And as she turned them over one by one, the floor she thought she had finally found beneath her opened up all over again. There they were, Shung-ho and Naya, candlelit and laughing, in a photograph dated 9 months before her son was even due. The braided strand, the plum lipstick, the perfume she could not place because she had smelled it on her best friend 1,000 times. Every comfort Naya had ever given her had been a performance staged on the very nights she left Amara's apartment to climb into Shungho's bed. There was even a photograph of the embrace, the night Amara had wept her heart out, Naya's arms around her and Naya's face, caught by some lens across the street, wearing the smallest, coldest smile. The woman comforting her about the affair had been the affair. Amara set the photographs down very gently, which was somehow more frightening than if she had thrown them. She did not cry. The crying woman had been left at a gate in the rain. What sat in the penthouse now was something colder and far more patient, a woman who held the lives of everyone who had wronged her in the palm of one hand and was deciding, slowly, what shape their ruin should take. "There is one more thing," Taemin said, and for the first time all night, the dangerous man hesitated. She looked up at him slowly. She had learned, in a single day, to hear the thing underneath a careful sentence. "What did you do?" she asked. He held her gaze. "The reason I found you before they did," he said, "is that I am the one who learned what the Choi family was planning. I let it happen. I needed you to have nowhere to go, but to me." The only man who had never lied to her had just confessed that his rescue was a strategy, that he had let her be thrown into the rain so she would land in his hands. Everyone, every single person who had touched her life had used her, the friend, the lover, the savior, and now she had the power to answer all of them at once. She rose. She did not scream at him, did not weep, did not throw the photographs. She simply said, in a voice that frightened even the men in the room, that she would deal with each of them in turn and that the first one would come to her, because she knew something the betrayers did not. She knew that grief travels fast, and that a friend who hears her victim has been spotted broken and alone will always, always come running to finish the job with a hug. "Make the call," she said. "Tell Naya I have been found and that I am asking for her." So they set the same trap that had been set for her, only this time the woman at the center of the web was not the prey. They dimmed the lights. They left one chair turned toward the door, and they waited for the sound of a friend arriving to comfort a victim who no longer existed. She came. Of course she came. Naya Bello swept through the door in a soft blush coat with a little gift bag of ginger sweets and her sorrow already arranged on her face, calling Amara's name with that warm, familiar concern, ready to perform the role she had perfected over a year of bedrooms and bathroom floors. Then she stopped. This was not a shelter or a hospital or a sad little apartment. This was a fortress of black stone and gold light 40 floors above the city, and in the chair turned toward the door sat someone who did not match the broken woman Naya had been promised. The gift bag slipped a little in her hand. Amara turned her head. The lamplight found her face, the crowned hair, the queen where the victim should have been, and across that vast dark room she looked at the friend who had cried with her by day and betrayed her by night, and she smiled the way a closing gate smiles. "Naya," she said softly, "come in. I have been waiting for you. We have so much to talk about." And across the room, the one person Amara had once trusted with everything realized, far too late, exactly whose home she had just walked into. The story does not end here. It cannot end here. If you need part 2, you have to tell me. So comment the words part 2 right now and comment them loud, because the louder this room gets, the faster the next chapter drops. She thought the worst was behind her. The worst just walked in.